I want to ask you guys what you think about this news that's come out that is all of our emails, all of our texts, pretty much every bit of digital communication happening in the United States is being filed away and recorded. It's identical to if in the 40s or the 50s or the 60s they'd been taking every piece of handwritten mail and Xeroxing it and putting it in a filing cabinet in case they needed to investigate you. What do you guys think about this?
You want to go first?
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible because it's just reflective of a paranoid mentality. Okay, there are terrorists in the world. That's what we call them. But, in the United States, 99.9999% recurring are not terrorists. We're not saying anything. But this country's only this country because of free speech, in my opinion, actually. I know, I get it. It's intelligence. I know it's spies, it's this and that. But as long as we continue totally respecting this divisive, paranoid sort of system, it'll just keep going on. So, I'm not surprised at all they're doing this, but I'm not. I think it sucks.
I've assumed since the 60s that they are doing it in one way or another, and always had in the forefront of my brain that it's absolutely transparent as far as they're concerned. They can get anything they want, anytime they want, and it is, and it was an us and them situation in the 60s, and that hasn't changed at all. The most disastrous thing for me in the whole thing is that, whatever vestiges of hope about Obama we might have had, boy, those are gone.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. That's the thing that every pothead has been saying forever, which is, it doesn't matter who you vote for. You're basically voting for a concierge who works for the bankers, and they all are going to have the exact same agenda regardless of what their personalities are.
Yeah. I think that word concierge really fits, Duncan. I mean, it's everybody has this naive kind of hope thing when Obama got there. He's standing there in Chicago giving that speech in whenever it was, January 2009, and everybody had a swelling of the heart. Oh, God, African-American running this country, a liberal, blah, 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 blah. But you're right, concierge time. Someone else is pulling the strings here. There's no question about that.
On the other hand, this is happening, and we are living here, and things are so extreme these days that it's all food for churning to transformation. Whatever our reactions are, whatever social action that we might take, and more of us need to be doing, whatever it is, if we don't consider it in that light, then we are just really at the whim of government, business, cabals, whatever.
So you mean you analyze the political playing field and your reactions to it, and through that you use that as part of your spiritual life.
Yeah, it's nothing but. I mean, I am, like what I just said about Obama, I guess that's thrown out, now that all of this has come to light. He's just obviously at the beck and call, and he's a concierge, as you said. And anger, I start to get angry about that. And then I start to see where is that coming from in me? And, what difference do I have going on than he has? He's obviously a decent guy. He's just being tossed about. He has seemingly good morals. And it's just misguided. So he's misguided. So I'm misguided in lots of stuff, too. In other words, I just got to examine my own shit before I throw it at somebody else. And all of this certainly brings up tremendous polarization. So it's an opportunity to look inside myself. And I take that alongside of also, when the petition comes around about this, of course I'm for it, and of course, I will participate in any way I can, including, talking to you right now.
Yeah, well, that's so far the only way that I've thought of, doing any kind of activism is just using this medium to sort of get the information out there. But just because I've had conversations with several of my friends, and I think in the beginning when I was thinking about it, I actually was thinking, well, whatever, who cares? It's nothing I can do about it, and I really, anything that most people maybe would want to hide, I've yapped about it on podcasts for years.
Right. Yeah. Well, in a way, that's a better condition to be in, at least in anger, than like blatant anger. I mean, it doesn't make me angry. It just kind of makes me understand that we got to be, as Raghu says, I agree with him. Don't dredge out of yourself the same kind of crap that you think they're doing, because then the whole thing will never stop. It'll just never stop.
Right. Now you're right, because since my naive thinking of like, oh, whatever, I have been getting increasingly, I would call it angry and paranoid, and I've just sort of found myself being magnetized towards the television and then getting immensely frustrated with CNN and Fox News and the way that the media is handling this. When you see these pundits that they're putting on in their interview style, then you begin to feel like you're watching Chinese state television, where they,
right.
they're actually giving an audience to these withered old men who are suggesting that whistleblowers should be executed in a serious way, and the reporter, instead of reacting as any good reporter would, which is like, are you serious? What are we now then? Then what are we? If you want to execute somebody for following their conscience and revealing to their country that this breach of the Constitution is happening. Well, then what are we? That's not, I don't know, maybe we've never been this, like, the country that you hear so many people sentimentally talking about. Maybe it's never been like that, but I guess I just wasn't around during Vietnam. So I didn't get a chance to see the I don't think the dragon's ever really revealed itself to such a degree as it is right now, or has been revealed.
Well, the quantum leap in technology has given these agencies the power that they didn't have at the time of Vietnam. I mean, there's a lot of paranoia about it, obviously, and it was awful. It was an awful time in a way for people. But now they have this thing that every day it gets 10 times more powerful. Look at what we can do with a laptop. You can only begin to imagine what they're doing with these huge mainframes in Virginia and Washington, So I'm not surprised at all by this. And yet what you said before, Duncan, really interested me. It's like, who cares? I've said everything in any case. I have nothing to hide. And, of course, that's kind of a good attitude in a way, because what's the point of getting all, bent out of shape and ruining your day, when you can, as Raghu said before, if there's action to be done, do it. And the rest of the time, you got to live your life and not have this sort of burning anger that I see on Facebook all the time, people just crazed angry about this stuff. I don't blame them, but obviously it doesn't work to just have, point counterpoint, anger, more anger.
Well, this is why I wanted to talk with you guys about this, because I think this is a curious predicament that people who are spiritual or people who have taken up a meditative practice find themselves in sometimes, which is sometimes I just wonder if this idea that we're all one thing is, and we've talked about this before, maybe I'm just hoping that we can come up with something that makes sense in light of this new thing that's happening. It's kind of like, okay, here I am. Do you know how an anaconda kills people, the actual way that it works?
No.
It's really horrifying. An anaconda, when it wraps itself around a being, what it does is every time the being exhales, it tightens. So every time you breathe air out, it tightens a little bit, making it so that eventually you can't breathe back in, essentially. And that's how you suffocate. And so if you kind of look at the history of what's been happening over the last, I don't know, probably since Bush and the illegal wars, what you see is this kind of very precise tightening that's happening a little bit at a time. And it seems like every time they're doing it, it's like a test, like let's see what they do if we put insane security checkpoints in the airports. Nothing. Oh, look, they didn't do anything. Okay. Well, now let's see what happens if they find out that we're monitoring every single piece of communication that they send digitally. Right? And then nothing. Well, then what's next? And what's next after that? And what's next after that? Eventually you get to a point where you're like, holy shit, I'm being suffocated by an anaconda. But it's too late. It's too late because you're in a train going to some camp, and that sounds so paranoid and insane, but historically it happens all the time. Look at what happened in Iran. Look at what happened in Germany. Look at what this is like a built-in. It seems like this is when societies go bad. It starts off like this. So that attitude of like, what can I'm just being paranoid, and I'll just go to my meditation or just go to my yoga class or just go jogging or just whatever the thing is. At some point, I don't know if that's the right thing to do anymore.
I don't get you. What do you mean? What is the right thing to do?
Well, I don't know. That's the problem. I mean, that's why I mentioned the Weather Underground, or that's why I mentioned like the radical. When do you radicalize? When do you like do what they're doing in Turkey? When does it become like Occupy Wall Street, but even more? I mean, at what point do you recognize that these people are not the same people as us? That these are more like occupiers than they are like a government?
Well, how far you want to get into, as you say, the paranoia of that is, there's many, many levels that you can get into that. And then that is, and it's not a matter of being spiritual. So what do you do if you're spiritual? It's all spiritual. It's all part. We're all contributing. So in my mind, if the people that, initiated Occupy Wall Street, and if that should escalate into what? Into a more violent situation after and the violence starts from the authorities, the police that are told to do this. Does it start there? Is it your dharma? Meaning, is it what it is that you're supposed to be doing in this life to be leading that particular charge and then encountering what you encounter? Perhaps. But, you are doing something. I mean, I guess I have a hard time with the conspiracy stuff. I'm not saying it could or couldn't be there. But if I live in that kind of a world, then my whole world is schizophrenic. My whole insides are schizophrenic. And I think I'd like to do something right around me, or, you're doing it on this podcast. You are making people aware. And you are, suggesting things that are very, very dark eventualities that are, of course, anything is possible. This, according to the Hindus, we are in the age of destruction. So, but I think you got to step back, because violence, I mean, that is the destruction inside yourself and the destruction for other people. That's not karma I would want to live with personally.
No, me either. I certainly wouldn't want to live with that. And I just wonder. It's just one of those things. Historically, when you look at the rise of totalitarian governments, they don't just spring up on a Wednesday and suddenly there's a tyrant. If usually when there's freedom. And Iran, I think, is a perfect model for that. They were very liberal and educated, and then the fundamentalists rose to power, and then things escalate towards the end of the thing, and then there's everything completely shifts, but there's a slow progression. And I just wonder, look, I can promise you one thing that is not going to happen is you will not find me marching around a government building wearing a gas mask and shaking my fist at the whatever the power structure happens to be. It's just I'm so dismayed by this that it has created a kind of turbulence inside of me.